Well, everyone, we've had a slight change to our programming today. We are going to have a special presentation from Mr. Amir Sultanov, First Secretary of the Embassy of Uzbekistan, and then we'll proceed with our panel on aligning education and employment with Ms. Lina Zuluaga of Georgetown University, Dr. Manish Kumar of the National Skills Development Corporation, and Dr. Pablo Acosta of the World Bank. Mr. Amir Sultanov, please feel free to join us.
Thank you, Jackie. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to me to be a part of Sailors Academy Summit and this panel, and I would like to give some insights into our approaches in Uzbekistan towards skill-oriented training and how we work and partnering with different American universities and business community of the United States. And Uzbekistan, as many developing countries, prepare for a more technologically and advanced digitized global economy, which will definitely require new skills and significantly higher level of human capital. And this new reality transforms the way we live, the way we work, and the skills that we need to gain in order to succeed. And education in Uzbekistan is understood to be a driver of transformation in the country's society and economy, and we are consistently improving our education system in the context of the country's wide reform program, which was launched in 2016 when the new president came to power. Education at all levels in Uzbekistan in a state of flux. All our efforts focus on building and fostering human capital and investments in this area. Annual expenditures for development and reforming the educational system in Uzbekistan make up to 12% of GDP, while the share in national budget expenditures exceeds 35%. It's one of the highest in the world. Within the past few years, the number of institutions has increased twofold, and currently there are around 300,000 students enrolled in 77 universities across the country. Uzbekistan is a promising educational market for foreign universities. Currently, it is a home of branches for UK's Westminster University, Management Development Institute of Singapore, Turin Polytechnic University, South Korean Inha, Busan, and other universities. And I'm very pleased to share with you that starting from November 1st this year, just a couple of weeks ago, the Missouri-based Webster University became the first American university who opened its branches in Uzbekistan. And we are proud to tell that it's become the first American university not only in Uzbekistan, but the entire Central Asian region. And now they have about 500 students enrolled in their campus and became the biggest foreign campus of the Webster University in Uzbekistan. And as a talented managers of all these universities, they are quite aware about the strength of Uzbekistan and the potential of the entire region. I can tell you that the strength, our strength, is our people. And Uzbekistan is Central Asia's most populous country. We have 33 million people. It's one half of the entire Central Asian region. Moreover, we are the youngest country in the world, with 60% population below the age of 30. It's around 37%, 12 million people under the age of 19. So you can imagine how the country with our 97% literacy rate, with so many youngsters thirsty for knowledge, could be so fortunate and get even simple profits for several universities who will open their branches in Uzbekistan. And however, investment in skills-oriented training are fundamental for us. That is why we are focusing on STEM in public education. That is why we have put our efforts to increase capacity for extension education programs, training workforce and industry professionals. We are reforming vocational education to render it more flexible and aligned with the labor market. After 11 years of study at schools, we are offering trainings at vocational colleges that last from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the specialty. The vocational colleges network, and the current number across the country is about 1,400, is being optimized based on the national and regional economic development priorities, labor market focus, and technological development and trends across the globe. The reform includes changes in adult training in both the employment and unemployment. These changes are aligned with international best practices in lifelong learning, under which vocational colleges play the crucial role in training and providing training programs. Currently, adult education is provided in centers managed by the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, as well as the private companies, offering adult training programs in such areas as information and communication technologies, the business administration, accounting, marketing, and etc. Employment in Uzbekistan are shifting right now from agriculture and industry to services, and we are striving to bring the best practices in partnering with our partners across the globe in the United States and other countries. And we have a very promising partnership, I can tell you, with the, for instance, with the South Carolina University to operate the Center for Service Management with a variety of mission, and particularly offering training service programs for professionals in hospitality and tourism, retail and e-commerce, transport and logistics, healthcare, insurance, banking, and so on. We are partnering as well with top-notch land-grant universities from Mississippi. Recently, we established a good partnership with the Texas A&M, and eager to have their involvement, active involvement in nurturing high skills workforce in agriculture, which will definitely benefit for us in terms of improving the capacity of the workforce in the country, but at the same time will meet the needs of the, for example, U.S. companies who are operating in the country. For example, we have John Deere, CNH Industrial, Silverleaf, and others have their plans and huge projects in the country. So we believe that this is the exact niche where U.S. universities and the business community could work side by side and benefit from improving the quality of education in the country, and at the same time align vocational offerings with the employer's needs. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel Aligning Education and Employment. Let's start with a video to spark your imagination, and let's think about how we can nurture what I call the survival skill. As a society, I think that as we drink water to be healthy, what the news are communicating to us, how we're feeding our brain with the news that we create as a society, and how we can collaborate to have a different news out there. So let's start with this industry. which of the goals would benefit the most from scientific journalism?
Me parece que es importante el objetivo que está relacionado con el empoderamiento de las mujeres, de las niñas también, y el objetivo que tiene que ver con una educación inclusiva.
Would newsrooms benefit from a collaboration with grad students skilled in data science and applied research?
Bueno, sí creo que nos beneficiaríamos, pero eso también tiene un reto, que es cómo lograr que dos lenguajes aparentemente distintos, que es el lenguaje de las personas que generalmente se ocupan de escudriñar en datos, se concilie con el lenguaje de los periodistas que andamos buscando historias, ¿no? Cómo lograr hacer una buena combinación de esas dos formas de analizar la realidad. It is time for journalists to save journalism.
In the file that we opened this morning that was working, it always works. In practice, and then when you're here, it doesn't work. So this video was a product of the alignment between education and employment. It was, in fact, a collaboration in the cloud between students and journalists. So the gap in the technology, media, and telecommunication industry will fall short 4.3 million workers by 2030. And the shortage of talent will cost 449.7 billion in unrealized revenue. And here we are. Scientific journals produce 2.5 million articles per year, and little, if any, are read by the general public. Buried in them are solutions. So I just want to spark your imagination in how we're gonna connect these students, but not only students, because we know that learners, we don't learn just with other students, but we learn with peers, mentors, society, parents, and journalists. So how we can make this collaboration possible. These numbers, 100 million young people are going to be able to learn new skills, but they don't have access. There are providers of online learning here in the audience. We are targeting to reach these numbers, but then I have another question for you and for the panel and for this summit, which is inspiring what you mentioned yesterday, are we in a deficit of aspirations? What I notice is that students are turning their backs even to free offer, so we need to engage them in very different ways. So we try to do it with our experiment, with the paper that we just published with Philip Long, that in fact he worked in MIT with BJ, which is BJ Kumar. So we architected this on-the-job solution to connect newsrooms with classrooms and with retired journalists to rebuild the story we're telling ourselves in our daily basis, and using artificial intelligence, using blockchain. So if we can make that together, that would be great. If each of your students is able to produce a video like this in collaboration with others, I think these are the type of things we want to see as the portfolios of our students. And we as society, we really want to read the type of news built with people that really are driven by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that they really are wanting to change the world, but then we need to enable that with technology. And having said that, I just want to welcome the amazing panel I'm going to host, so please join me. And please, the clicker, well, I'm going to be reading who is going to be in this panel, and I want to invite you to join me here on the stage. Pablo Acosta is program leader for human development in Brazil at the World Bank. Pablo has a PhD in economics from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and he's going to give us global figures on this issue of the future of work, the robots. So please join us. And this is the clicker.
All right. You hear me? I hope so. So can we put the presentation? Yeah. 1 second. We are talking about technology, but we need to improve the technology. No, that's. It has a robot in the cover. Before, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, go. No, go. You passed already. Go a few slides up. Go a bit up. There. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me, Sailor Academy, and I'm Pablo Acosta. I work for the World Bank in the sector of we call it global practice of human development. So we look at aspects, of course, of education, skills, employment, and I started with one of my first slide is basically making an ad of our latest, what we call World Development Report, that every year is in a different topic. For 2020, it's going to be about the changing nature of work. So many of the reference I'm going to make is drawing about the changing nature of work, and this is a topic that, of course, is very close to what we are seeing today in the academy. So when you talk about the changing nature of work, we tend to immediately jump into robots are coming, are going to steal off our jobs. There is nothing we can do. And I mean, that's a cartoon that basically shows the fear that people will have that their job will disappear tomorrow by robots. And we know that that's a very extreme view. And there is a lot of debate. It was quoted in the McKinsey report, which one of the first one that started looking at the risk of automation of different occupations. But actually, we think that the situation is a bit more nuanced. And again, it's not a settled question. But what we want to phrase, at least at the World Bank, is irrespectively of how many of these jobs will change, we definitely all agree that we need to prepare better our human resources for the digital age. No? So, and that will, at the end of the day, determine whether humans dominate robots or robots dominate humans. No? So that's basically the big question we have. And why, why we have this debate? Because it's not a clear cut. Technology can actually go in two ways. On one hand, it may substitute some workers. We all know that. We are thinking about the labor-saving approach, and that basically the automated assembly line that will create job loss in many countries, income inequality, potentially worse in working conditions. But on the other hand, if you see in the positive way, technology can also increase productivity, and especially if it's accompanied by the right skills. And that actually will lead us to the higher equilibrium in many cases, in higher wages and potentially less hours of work and better compensation and work conditions. So whether this we go in one way or another depends a lot on the different type of occupations, of course, we are talking about. And later we will try to go to the skills that determine that. But one aspect that researchers have been looking at is, in particular, how routine are tasks that are related to a particular job. So routine, as you know, is repetitive tasks that require really relatively very little thinking, is mechanical, think about the assembly line work, versus other occupations that are more non-routine. So that changes over time. And it doesn't necessarily need to be associated with very high levels of skills, but it requires a lot of anticipation and at the same time flexibility. These are, for instance, you may think of a hotel maid type of occupation. On the other hand, we also look at the human aspects of those skills, of those occupations. So some of them are pure manual, physical, that would require very nuanced human interactions. Again, another example could be construction worker. versus occupations that would require more socio-emotional skills, ability, empathy, ability to work as a team, etc. Think about, for instance, a customer service type of occupation, or analytical, which is much higher order in the sense of requiring creativity, problem-solving skills. So these are the differences of the different occupations will determine, again, how many of them are more risk of automation or not. And some researchers, again, have been looking at the bank and in other places. It was a very influential, again, work by, as well as McKinsey. We did at the bank. Apologies, you cannot see very well there, but basically we were plotting different type of occupations according to two dimensions. One is intensity in use of ICT technology, and also risk of automation. And that depends, again, on the aspects of non-routine or physical characteristics of the different occupations. And you see everything all over the place. There is no real, for instance, clear relationship between intensity of use of ICT and higher risk of automation. You have some occupations that actually are under risk that requires a lot of use of technology. For instance, numerical clerk that could be eventually being replaced by certain algorithms. You also have occupations that today do not require perhaps so many ICT skills, but are also under risk of automation. And think about agriculture workers in most countries that are still not necessarily mechanized. On the other hand, you have other occupations that may require a lot of today ICT skills, but at the same time are less risk of automation. Think about, again, marketing, sales representative, public relations. Why? Because they also require a lot of human interactions that cannot be easily replaced. And then, of course, you have occupations that are less intensive of ICT and less risk of automation. Again, think about, for instance, handicraft workers. So these are all over the place, and depending on the structures of the different economies, the occupation that they have today, and the perspective of the occupation that can be generated in the future, countries will be subject to more or less more risk of automations of their jobs. But basically, irrespective of this debate, there is also a consensus that at the end of the day, the future of work will entail two forces that will play at the same time. One is the one that, again, we are discussing, or we have been discussing until now, automation, that will imply a reallocation of existing type of jobs. So some sectors in the old sectors, we call it, will lose employment, and again, because they are more subject to being potentially more routine type of jobs or manual, while others may gain, those who are non-routine or that require human interactions. And at the same time, innovation will also push the frontier and create new jobs that we cannot imagine today, that do not exist today. And you were talking a bit of some of them, no? So new opportunities. So in the end of the day, we conclude that countries will be more or less protected for these trends if we base, of course, if we have the right policies to push for innovation that will also help create new occupations. But automation is one extreme. No, it's one extreme of the spectrum. It's the total loss of a particular job to a machine. But in any case, we see that trends that are happening today are affecting all types of occupations and jobs. So you see that in general, fewer standard long-term contracts, and that's countries that, even countries that have highly formalized labor today, are seeing this particular trend. The gig economy, the sharing economy is already trying to push and press governments to think about policies, especially labor contract policies and education policies. So we are seeing trends of more short-term and flexible work, and also platform-based employment. So again, you know the sharing economy, Airbnb now rents more rooms than hotels, Uber in many cases are providing in many countries, more high rates than regular taxis that are regulated, etc. Now, how to prepare the labor force for this new challenge? And again, every country will be at different stages. We saw before in the previous presentation the challenges of regional sub-Saharan Africa, where still we have significant challenges in getting the basic skills. In others that are more advanced, we had to talk about higher order skills. At the World Bank, we established last year a very important measure that we think is going to orient policies, which is called the Human Capital Index. It's focused, of course, in aspects of education, health, and the idea is try to measure what is the potential that an 18-year-old children has in particular country based on what we have been investing in human capital until then. So take two examples. Dolores is a girl that has received adequate nutrition, stimulation during infancy, has received opportunities of early childhood, completed education, secondary education, and transition into tertiary, becoming an engineer with a good quality. So Dolores probably has the maximum potential of that child in that particular country. Versus Felipe, who on the other hand has poor nutrition, little stimulation. He went probably to school, but it's a very low quality, and probably didn't even finish secondary school. So countries can be characterized along this dimension, and that's what we try to do with the Human Capital Index, trying to look at different variants. And you have countries like Singapore, which is at the top of the frontier, where most of their kids are at the full potential, considering the dimensions I will mention next. And then you have sub-Saharan African countries where this potential is less than 40%. So the gap is significant across countries, and of course there is a relationship between the GDP per capita of those countries, the level of development, and how the children are realizing that potential. So this is a very powerful tool that we are having to discuss now with different governments of how to stimulate different type of policies. When we start to dissect, and these are the regions of the world: Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, East Asia and the Pacific, Europe and Central Asia, Middle East, and Latin America, you find that basically most of the differences in human capital is explained by one particular factor, which is education learning. So there are access issues still in many regions. So Saharan Africa was mentioned before. We still have about 250 million children below 14 years old, that between 6 and 14 years old, that do not attend the school. So that's a huge number. But also more important, in particular in other regions, is not just that kids go to school, but actually that they learn something useful. And that's the new concept we also produced very recently. We call it learning poverty. What it means to be learning poor. We try to debate about different types of measures at the World Bank, but one thing that we all thought is very simple and clear, and where there is still a lot of challenges, is the ability of a 10-year-old to read or understand a simple story. So we all take it as given, no? Our kids probably at 10-year-old are already reading Harry Potter or very stimulating levels of stories. In most of the world, actually, this is not possible. And despite kids are in school. So in upper middle income school, we find in income countries, we find that about 29% of the kids at age 10 cannot still read a simple text or understand a simple story. In low income countries, this is, again, it's mostly concentrated in Africa and South Asia, 90%. Only 1 out of 10 can understand or read a simple story. So again, when we talk about the skills to build for the 21st century, let's not forget that in many countries we haven't even achieved the basic, right? And again, this is another way to show the same statistic, that basically trying to measure based on this learning poverty concept, how years of school do not seem the same in many countries. So 14 years of school in Singapore, where kids reach, I mentioned before, almost 80–90% of the potential. In terms of learning poverty in the Singapore rate is only 2% of the kids cannot read a short story at age 10. So it's full potential. But you have countries like, despite achieving higher years of education, when you adjust for the quality of the actual content of what they learn, it's much less. Brazil, the country where I work, 12 years of education, pretty much everybody goes to secondary school and it finishes. But when we take into account what they learn, it's actually equivalent to only 8 years of education. Ghana also achieved almost 12 years of education. The equivalent is only 6 years of education. If you want to think 6 years of education in Singapore, equivalent to 12 years of education in Ghana. That's a simple way to understand the differences we're talking about. So, okay, I'm gonna wrap up and resume towards the end of the message. But I wanted to really give a releasing, especially to the audience, that technology will help us, but also we also need to remember that in many countries the basic is not right. Now, beyond the basics, of course, we had to talk about the skills that technology complements and not the technology replaces. That's where the race between robots and humans that we were mentioning before. And so, again, I was mentioning before that we're talking about technology affecting all types of occupations and jobs. And that is true. We think that for the 21st century, you first need to concentrate on 3 types of buckets of skills. And that's where there is consensus also in the literature. Job-specific knowledge, or higher-order cognitive skills in many cases. Digital literacy, because technology requires that increasingly. And at the same time, socio-emotional and human type of skills. And take 3 different types of occupation. Agricultural laborer. We may think that the only thing he needs is actually operate and monitor an equipment. No, actually now, today, to be a successful agricultural laborer, you also need to check, for instance, prices in the internet of the crops that you're going to plant, or you want to anticipate that will have higher yields. So that will require, access to internet, knowing how to browse internet, how to use databases. On the other hand, you have the other spectrum as well, computer programmer. We may think that the only thing he needs now is to understand database management, programming. Actually, oral communication, complex problem solving, critical thinking, active listening will also make the difference for that particular programmer to succeed in the labor market. So there are nuances all around different occupations, and again, the focus on automation is also making us lose this particular aspect that all jobs are changing because of technology. How this skill will be formed, that's another discussion, and with different governments we are trying to create frameworks to support creations of 21st century skills. And again, as you can see the different columns, there are different opportunities to create behavioral skills. There is a consensus that you have to start early on, and so even in early childhood education, you need to start investing because otherwise later on it's very difficult to malleate. While digital literacy skill, we are finding that even, again, small children are now understanding the basics of coding, and increasingly the programs are including digital literacy skills. Okay? So to conclude, basically we are talking about moving from basic skill or knowledge in general to also other type of skills, including socio-emotional skills, learning to learn, and digital literacy. We're talking about just focusing on education and training when you are young to, as we see in the previous panel, through the life cycle now. So it will require to keep updated as particular with the technological change. We talk about moving again from multi-year educational programs with highly theoretical to maybe short tailored courses and learning to learn. This is something that will also be required as the technology continue to change. And finally, in terms of institutional framework, beyond going into education and training traditional institutions, we're talking now employer-driven training. We're talking about web-based training courses, as I was also discussed before. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm happy to welcome Ken Eisner. He's an education technology leader with 20 years experience on this. Ken founded Amazon Web Services Educate, which is the Amazon's global initiative to dramatically accelerate cloud learning and prepare students for a cloud-enabled workforce. In the preparation of this panel, we were talking about that we almost all live in the cloud. For example, Terry you live in Vancouver, right? But you last week were in Africa, and now we're here. And there's 1 million companies in the world that are using services on the cloud, and we're talking about how to make portable skills, how to make kids ready for what also Michael Saylor was telling us yesterday, how we can able to use the cloud and work in this liquid economy so everyone can really take advantage of the learning opportunities, but also the job. So who else better to tell us about this than Ken? Welcome.
Thank you very much. And again, following an economist, forgive me for my lack of erudition. I'll first dive into the cloud need case and kind of why we got involved, why Amazon Web Services got involved so deeply in this education to employment alignment. So going back to 2006, Amazon Web Services, or AWS, launched the cloud. On-demand access to IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. Could go in depth as to exactly what that is, but it's basically the whole technology stack. What that did was it changed the means of buying, selling, utilizing technology and leveraging it as a strategic asset to your company to move fast. First, we got the startups, and then the Fortune 100s, and then governments going to the cloud. That created a giant opportunity. Amazon Web Services, AWS, was the fastest IT vendor to ever hit a $10 billion US yearly run rate. And just a few years after that, we're now a $35 billion US run rate and growing at still a near startup-like clip of 35% year over year. Fourth industrial revolution. The cloud and the advanced services like robotics, IoT, machine learning, AI, all come into play now, especially with this vast explosion in data and the easy ways to leverage it for company, for corporate, government, social well-being. That created this huge job opportunity. Cloud computing has been the #1 LinkedIn skill for the past 4 years in a row, meaning employers are saying that's the #1 skill we want to hire. Artificial intelligence, again, a born in the cloud type skill, snuck in at #2 over the past year. The problem is we can't recruit people at nearly the fast enough rate that we need in order for our businesses to grow. Glassdoor ran a stat with companies over their platform between 2009 and 2015. This 6-year span, the time to hire increased by 80%. Think about that. A near doubling in that time to hire. Think about what it does for companies like us that depend on builders to build. We need innovators to grow our innovation. Think about the extra cost. And obviously, think about all of those students who are left out of that opportunity if we can't recruit quickly enough. So we developed AWS Educate to bridge that gap between education and employment. If you look at it, there's this dichotomy that exists has long existed, we've created between liberal arts education and vocational education. We've created a line between academia and industry. And so we're really not sharing. It's kind of like academia produces, industry accepts. If industry doesn't like, which they haven't, 11% of industry executives say that education is preparing students for this world. Academia has a different viewpoint, and we're stuck. So we are built to change that. The program, AWS Educate, is a global program to provide students with that access into cloud careers through resources provided to students and teachers, free access into AWS. It's a hands-on learning environment inside the classroom, curriculum, professional development, and so on. But it's all based on what we call this cloud competency framework. So we produce this by working internally with Amazon, with customers and partners, with third-party market data, hundreds of hours put into this to define what are the most in-demand careers in the jobs and skills required for those. We came up with 28. They fit into 4 different major buckets: software development, including DevOps and web development engineer, cloud architect. Number 3 is the data world. And again, data is vastly changing. We're going to have to think about that from a long-term aspect about how that permeates down into K-12. But it includes data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, business analytics, and so on. And then the 4th one permeates is operations, and it goes more into some of those middle skill opportunities like cloud support engineer, even cybersecurity, which can go all the way up. And then we develop the level 1 through 3 knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to obtain those jobs. Think in some ways of level 1 as being things that are durable. Level 3 may be specific computing skills that'll change over time, but enables education to be modularly changing out pieces in their education while still providing that competency-based framework in order to do that. We're speaking in the same vernacular as education, so education can work hand in hand with us to change curriculum and provide students with those pathways. Long story short, hundreds of thousands of students, over 10,000 educators, over 2,400 educational institutions in over 200 countries around the world. It was largely in the US to start. 65%, we actually started 18 and over. It's totally flipped. We're more, about 65% or so outside of the US. ASEAN has been our biggest growth point. And a lot of exciting stuff happening there, but it's permeating various different places of the world. We saw all the top 10 leading global computer science institutions at higher ed. But one thing that was really cool is that the vocational community colleges, the tech schools, started going at a rapid rate because they already want to align with industry. We began in Los Angeles on career pathways between grades 9 and 14 in technology. They produced a big sequence of courses, high success rates, everybody staying in and completing the courses. They see the vast relevance because it's hands-on, 1, and 2, there's a job at the end. And so because of that, in 18 more colleges and sister high schools, by the way, both majority, minority, largely Hispanic, underserved students in Los Angeles, beginning that. And because of that, it's expanded tremendously. First, Northern Virginia Community College, and sorry about the slide, launched a 2-year associate degree program across the river. George Mason followed up this year with a bachelor's program in cloud computing this year. The UK with the Career Colleges Trust, and Bahrain at the University of Bahrain. And now we're seeing entire states go to it. So first, Louisiana, across their entire community college system, across their entire University of Louisiana state system, and embedding K-12 on career pathways. Texas, over 700,000 students in their community college system will have access to these programs, along with hundreds of thousands of students in the Dallas, Irving, and Houston school districts. In Virginia, some of the top universities joined the entire community college system, and you had Tim Sands saying, we are now hitting an inflection point in higher education in general. I think that's because education and industry are actually starting to link around this. There is a notion to move at the speed of the cloud because we have a giant workforce need. Governments are aligned, and we're getting educational systems. So the stuff that started in Los Angeles, that curriculum is being shared with, in Virginia, it's being shared to the UK. We're creating some really interesting bedfellows around this. And so we see vast expansion happening. I was in Singapore a few weeks ago, in India the prior month. We've got a lot of stuff going, and it's happening at a very high level with government as well as entire systems to try to align to this new mandate. I will turn it back to Lina.
We have also in the panel Manish Kumar. He's the CEO of the National Skills Development Corporation in India. We have enjoyed a good delegation, the people coming from India. And what is particular about the institution he leads is this was created by the government in the year 2009, and the ownership is shared. So the public sector owns 49% of this institution, and 51% is owned by the Chamber of Commerce, which is a very particular and very interesting opportunity to align. And you have 5 million kids, or not kids, people around the PhDs and even technical and vocational and you upskill them every year. So welcome, share that with us.
Thank you. We can set the presentation. So many thanks for inviting me here and being part of this distinguished gathering. I would speak a bit about National Skill Development Corporation, how we do skilling in the context of India. But let me just lay out the challenge that we face and the background in which we work. Firstly, looking at India's problem, if you look at our total population, about 5% of our people, 5 to 10, is on the lower side, I would believe at this particular point, would be people below the poverty line. So therefore, let's assume about 7.5% of our population are below the poverty line. But it's very important to remember that almost 60% of India is above the poverty line, but below twice the poverty line. So these are people whom we call vulnerable people, who with a little bit of shock can actually fall down very rapidly economically. And therefore, the highest concern among them that they need to economically get more and more empowered. So that's the second part to remember. And there would be another 35%, which is well off relatively. That's one part of it. The second part to remember in India is of the total population that we have, about 44% of the population is actually in the labor force. Not everybody is in the labor force. There is also a very interesting trend that from 2005 onwards, as India has got more and more prosperous, the female labor force participation has plummeted. It's actually declined very, very sharply. And that's because of the prosperity of India, and that there is a kind of arrangement in the family that the female doesn't go to work. So that's another challenge that we face. And we also realize that among let's say 42 or 420 million workforce that we have, 350 million would be people who are already skilled but are not recognized for their skilling. And that creates its own challenge that you actually lose your bargaining power. You don't have the ability to be mobile in the market. So that's the broad background within which we work. We were created as I mentioned earlier in 2009, and we were created as a public-private partnership. We are a not-for-profit organization. We are led by an industry leader in India, Mr. A.M. Nayak, who is the chairman of what we call the Larsen & Toubro, one of the largest company in India. It's a private sector company. And then out of 13 board members that we have, 3 are from the government and 9 are from the private sector. These are various chambers of commerce, as you can see here, who own 51% of the share capital of that particular company. And then, of course, I'm a professional hired to run it. The interesting thing of this public-private partnership is that even though the structure is like this, you'll find a lot of money actually comes into it from the government side also. And the private also puts in money, but they put it directly into project, whereas the government puts its money through NSDC because it expects that we will have enough control and methods of watching over the money. So I think important part of this discussion that we had today is, and which I'm basically trying to also perhaps focus on, is the political economy of how you do skilling, because when a large amount of money comes in, there is a lot of attention on your system, and then how do you run your system that it is transparent, is trustworthy, but it's also effective. And I think that's a very big challenge which developing countries face. So what do we do? There's just a sense of what we do. When we started in 2009 until today, we are actually a development banker. So we have almost $500 million portfolio. We give loans to private sector entities to create capacity for skilling. And over time, we have had about 609 partners, and they have created about 11,300 centers across India. So that's the capacity. The annual capacity will be about 7.5 million people whom we could skill. We actually, at the operating level, do about 5 million annually. That's the number of people we skill every year. Apart from this, in 2015, the government actually created a Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. That's basically a show of commitment from the government that they also want to put in money into skilling in a bigger way. And when the ministry came in, they set up a $2 billion program, which is a subsidy-based program for running skills. aimed at skilling about 10 million people, and they put that money into us, saying that you run it for us. So we actually help them run that system in the entire country. We have 30 state governments, and we believe that unless the states buy in the whole concept of skills, it's not going to go forward. So therefore, we do capacity building of states, state governments. Each of them now have what they call state skill mission, which implies that they have actually borrowed this idea and are willing to carry it forward. About SSA governance, so we call it Sector Skill Council. I'll come into details later. But this is a body which we have created, a series, there are about 37 of them that we have created, which are industry bodies, and they actually identify what is the job role which is emerging in the market. Because as some of the panelists talked earlier too, that academicians can create jobs, but are they relevant? Is jobs for whom? I mean, if you create a course, is it really something which the industry wants? Or is it something not relevant to the industry, but you are still creating it because that's how it's been in the past? So I think this body helps us to do that, and it's a very important one from that perspective. Over time, we have created more than 2,200 different job roles using the industry leaders, and this is almost 6,000 national occupation standards, as we call them, that has been created through them. Apart from this, we are also into international collaboration. We look at sending people from India to different countries and sending good quality people. Average age in India is about 29, and in Japan is about 48. So therefore, there is a need for healthcare workers in Japan. And we teach Japanese to Indians, and a certain part of India actually are so good at language, they pick up Japanese really quick. And we teach between 6 months to 9 months fluent Japanese, and we send people to Japan. So that's one part we do. We recently had requests from Denmark for some people for tourism and hospitality, so we are also working on that. We again teach language. And Sweden, requests for construction workers. So we work on both the language part as well as the domain skills, both of it. We do a lot of assessment and certification. This is an important part of the work that we do. Again, we do this through sector skill councils, and in whatever we do, there are two parts which actually are very important. One is we have a highly IT-enabled system that helps us to manage this skill ecosystem, because one part is how do you teach, and we have a lot of tools for that too. We partner with a lot of groups across the world, including actually Amazon, AWS too. And then IBM Academy, we have BetterU, and we have our own internal eSkill India platforms. So there are multiple platforms. There are some based on Silicon Valley, like Acosta, that we use. But apart from that, we also use it for the management purpose, because when you put in so much money and you're operating at such scale, then you have to be really quick on how the money flows, as well as how you could get reports quick enough that you can analyze whether things are working or not working. So a lot of tools that we have developed over time for ensuring, like if I were to actually check even now how many people are attending my class, I can do it sitting here. So we got a method that throughout India, if people are attending classes, we can actually measure, count the number of people, and this count is trustworthy because they are based on UID, universal, we have a UID number for everybody in India, and it's biometrics, so everybody who attends has to put in his biometrics every day, and that biometric gets checked with UID, and therefore you can't really fake. Yeah. Yeah, we are not too tough though. So we are up to 70% of attendance is fine. But I think what we are interested is if the assessments should show that you are actually learning, and therefore the quality of assessment becomes quite critical for us, and we try to continuously improve that quality of assessment. These are the different sector skill councils which I wanted to talk about. There are some cross-functional and social kind of sector skill council. We skill almost 10,000 persons with disability. And we realize that certain type of disability is actually preferred by industry. So there are hotels in India which take 30% of the people who cannot speak, but have extremely good manners. So therefore, we skill them for that particular capability, and we get them employed. Then there are textile mills who actually prefer people who cannot hear. because to them, they find that it's exceedingly difficult for a normal person to be working in that environment, but it's important that this work gets done. And therefore, we have been able to find at least 7 to 10 job roles where the preference for persons with disability is higher. We actually are also setting up a university for disabled people, for skilling disabled people outside Mumbai. And that's going to focus very big time on them. Apart from that, agriculture, which is gradually declining, we have a sector skill council on them, looking at new technology like drones and others that are coming up, and how farmers could actually begin using drones for better output that they could hope for. Secondary sector, you can see list of things that we do, and some of the interesting one is IT, ITS is normal, and that's something which we are usually known for. Retail is another sector which is very high in demand in India. It's a service sector where a lot of people actually get jobs. We have logistics, which is growing very, very fast and rapidly. We do quite a bit of work there. Tourism and hospitality. Finally, in the tertiary sector, a series of them that you could see. We are also into, for example, aviation, the cabin crews, we skill them too. And we provide them within India as well as outside India through various training partners that we have. A lot of work on textile and handicraft, and of course on hydrocarbons and various other things that we have. So it's the whole range within which we have skilling embedded. The interesting thing is, each of these sectors is led by, as I said, the industry captain, and it's a not-for-profit body. And they essentially have a committee which consists of most of the people from private sector, a few from the government, which helps them understand how the market is changing. So one of the key things that they really help us do is these different job roles which comes with expiry date. They check whether this job role is still relevant or is there something new which is emerging from the market. So they are in some sense our market intelligence unit. They give us a prior understanding that this is the type of job which is emerging, and therefore let us change our courses, let's change our syllabus, and let's begin preparing people for what the market is looking for. So therefore, these bodies become extremely important to us. They are also responsible for assessment and certification eventually. I mentioned about some of the international collaborations that we do. A few things which I have not mentioned is that we work with Singapore closely for training of our trainers. A lot of courses that they create for us for this purpose. And we also work with them for future of jobs. A lot of discussion that we have with them on how they see the jobs are changing, and apart from the internal consultation that we might have. Apart from this, we are actually also helping the World Bank take skilling into some countries. So we are formal advisor to the World Bank in Jordan, where we teach about some of the sectors that I listed out there. We are also into Africa, some of the countries in Africa, where we try and send our knowledge. And we also work in Morocco, actually, for that purpose, where we are sharing. And Morocco is a place where we learn something and we also give something, so it's a two-way process out there. Just a bit of idea of how the skills paradigm changes things in real world. We do randomized sample survey from time to time to understand that does skilling really impact? I mean, does it make a difference in the lives of people? So a few anecdotal things. We have observed that the driverless cars in California are run by girls from Eastern India, whom we skill. And actually, it surprised us. We were also not expecting that. So essentially, they get pictures of some streets in California which they're tagging, showing the median of the road, or maybe a trash can and what might be a curve of the road. I see. So that's very interesting. And we were actually quite surprised by that. So in some sense, while jobs are being lost because of the nature of IT world, but there are new jobs which are being created, and these new jobs are going to people who ordinarily would not have got, or would perhaps not even would have got employment, but got skilled in that particular stuff, and they are from rural part of India, and they are working on it. So some of the things which I'm showing here is about recognition of prior learning, where we do work, some work, how that leads to increase in income of people, and by how much. This increase is within 6 months of their taking the training, this particular figure that I've given here. And the interesting part is, the lower your educational level, higher is the change in your income. So if you are extremely poor in terms of your educational system, then the change in your income is higher. The good thing about, I think, the system that we have created is that these are small modular ones, which takes you about 3 to 6 months. And you could actually do those 3 to 6 months, go into labor force, then you can come back again, do another, and then if you keep repeating that, within maybe 3, 4, 5 years, you can actually earn a Bachelor of Vocational Education. Or you could end up with a higher level diploma. So therefore, high level of flexibility to you on what you can accomplish. So these are a few things which I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. We're running out of time, so I want to jump to the public if you have questions. But I'm going to start with some while you get ready your questions. So we were talking about how to prepare those who may have left school without fundamental skills and the informal economy. And so you want to tell us something in?
Yeah. So I think there's a notion, there's a big notion of what skills will be portable, what skills will last. The way we address that again, we start with that cloud competency framework and we say, hey, we're orienting stuff modularly, so if they are at the lower level on the skill set, they could be removed. I mean, again, does a student need to know a basic programming language? The answer really is no. Which gets kind of that second thing. They need computational knowledge. They need to be able to go in and out of various different programming languages, and they need hands-on to the keyboard in order to have that practical experience doing that. I think data science is another big thing. I think we really need to reevaluate the way we're pathing students. Is algebra and calculus, are those the paths that we need to be taking people to, or do we need to be going deeper into statistics and opening up students into non-relational data and streaming data? As the world changes, we really need to be looking at math differently. And then we also address that cloud literacy piece. The other thing that I think is important, so 21st century skills are absolutely vital. The one thing I pressure test, though, is that a be-all and end-all? Have we really defined that well? For instance, the world is becoming insanely ambiguous for students. Jobs change, industry changes, decisions change. A student, interviewees often ask me, what's your average day like at Amazon? There is no average day. You cannot prepare for that day. You have big rocks and you got to figure out how to prioritize. But getting students into a world where they've been pathed from middle school to high school, primary to secondary to 2-year to 4-year and into the work, that's dead. We need to have students who are used to going in and out of ambiguous settings. Are we teaching people really to fail? We call it at Amazon invent and simplify. Are we de-risking risk? Are we encouraging them to take risk and iterate upon it and fail? And are we teaching them to move fast? Nobody coming into Amazon is used to the speed at which we go. Are we really? I think we need to look internally. 21st century skills are important, and are we preparing kids to move fast? Are we preparing them to think big? Are we giving them a TEV-DES mentality? Are we enabling them to deal with ambiguity when we're constantly marching them towards final degrees, final exams, and a terminal end to education?
You're opening it up for questions to the audience. I don't want to.
Yes. No. You can ask your. Well, let me go first to Manish and then go to your question. We were talking about the informal economy and if the informal economy appreciate people when they get skills, and you have an experiment that you run in India.
Yeah, so we looked at numbers to understand whether the informal economy responds to people whom we skill and whether they realize the value that is added. So a randomized sample survey that we repeated 3 times, firstly ourselves, and then we asked a third party to look at it. And every time the numbers came around the same. So essentially what we have found is somebody is unskilled and gets hired in an informal economy. And then somebody gets skilled through us, then gets certified after he completes his education, and then gets his job. So between these two, we have found a 15% differential in the wages that they get. What has concerned us, though, is that an average person in India, after getting skilled through us, when he's entering the workforce for the first time, gets about 9,000 rupees per month. His expectation from life is 18,000 rupees. So he gets exactly half of what his expectation is, which basically implies that there's very high level of attrition. So anybody gives him 500 rupees extra, 1,000, he's willing to change, he or she is willing to change the job. So that's, I think, an issue which has concerned us. And we have also found that there's a preference in India for government jobs, as many people who are from India will know. And that's because at the lower level, government jobs actually gives 18,000. And then we have also found that when a person reaches 18,000, which normally he does if he sticks to a job in about 2 years' time, he then sticks with that particular company for a little longer than he would have otherwise done. So there is interesting trends there. The industry opposes giving more because they say we become uncompetitive if we were to pay more. We push from our side that you need to pay more. So it's a little bit of dialogue and discussion that keeps happening.
Great. Your question.
Thank you very much. Fascinating. Quick comment, Ken?
Yeah.
It sounded like what you described in your speak is something called dynamic exponential learning. It sounds kind of like that thing. But my question to the panel, including the moderator, is when Alexa can program our phone and teach our children, how will we upskill, reskill the student and the teacher and the coder? Let me say it again because I stumbled. I think I have much copy.
Do the microphone. When Alexa can program our phone and teach our students, how will we upskill or reskill the coder and the teacher?
I don't think so I'll have an accurate answer to you, but what I've found is if you look at Alexa and the voice revolution that is coming in, a lot of IT courses that are built around voice and artificial intelligence relating to voice, we have found new courses emerging in India which are related to that. And perhaps a large number of people, we feel, talking to our partners, will be employed simply creating those voices. And the interesting thing is we talk a lot in English, and we think that the world is only in English, but a large number of people in Amazon actually are being focused on Hindi and Tamil. These are 2 very big languages in India. So they are thinking about voice-based AI that are in Hindi as well as in Tamil, because that's where things, as you are saying, will happen. But for creating that data, because you require voice data now, you require human beings. And I think that's what is going to happen, that you're going to go in a different value chain, and the ones which we know are going to vanish. Since we don't know the ones which are not arising yet, so there's a fear that is it that we're going to lose a lot? But it looks like there would be a positive change too.
Do you want to
No, I mean, I think it's a very interesting question and also subject to research. We don't have still randomized control trial of giving Alexas to kids, but we do have studies that show that, for instance, giving laptops to every student, that it was very fashionable until very recently. Every country just concentrating on giving laptops has zero impact, zero impact on learning, unless you have prepared the teachers to really be a facilitator on the learning process. So at the end of the day, a laptop, Alexa, is going to be a tool. And of course, again, as many jobs are changing, the job of the teacher will change a lot. It's also being affected by automation, by technology. So the teacher maybe has to become more of a facilitator. There is expanding the different type of access to knowledge of the students, as we all know. And so that's going to be my answer. In the end of the day, it's going to be complementary. It's not going to be a substitution, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, I tend to, I agree with that. I think these are tools for, helping students inside the classroom, helping teachers, direct their learning activities. I think, over time, we're going to, as we move to that learning being owned by the student, with their data being owned by the student, the portability of that, teachers, facilitators, mentors, should be able to play a much greater role in personalizing that education with the student. We've gone through phases. It's kind of like, I don't know, Gates used to say, we're going to overestimate the things that happen in the next few years and underestimate. I think the use of personalized learning and leveraging against that, especially with the vast explosion of data and machine learning opportunity, will open that up anew.
Well, I will respond going to the beginning of the video, which is the survival skill. We sometimes forget that our species was able to be superior to bigger animals that were in the planet because we were able to have a social brain that make us develop the technology, the most important technologies. We were able to talk, to collaborate. And if we don't make that, again, a priority in education, I don't find any better alignment for our humankind. If we need to survive, we need to make that together. So for me, and I'm so happy to hear you when you say that in the job posting on even the computer scientists, these oral communications play a very important role. And at Georgetown, when I talk with the students of data science, they are telling me, I don't want to have the life of a coder. I don't want to have that life. I'm thinking to change it. So I see all the companies very excited trying to align everyone to learn how to code, and then seeing the students, in fact, saying, okay, probably not. I'm trying to engage them in a different way. That's why the project is trying to make this collaboration between different people, and not only to tell that it's not only but also. That is my new mantra. It's not only skills but university and attitudes. It's not only that we need people trained, but also people in universities make their contribution. So it's the enrichment of respecting that everyone has something to bring to the table, even people that they don't want to never join the system and just be part of a community and in an informal way to learn and we teach each other.
Just to add one thing to that. So at Amazon, we don't use PowerPoints. This is like the only time. We use written documents.
Come to visit.
We use narratives. So you go into a meeting, you present a paper. It has to be 6 pages or less so it can be consumed during that time. People read it and then respond. Like communication, which is one of the most powerful tools. It enables you to dive deep, it enables you to be data-driven, but it requires you to be a great communicator. Whether it's on the written or the oral side, you do not present it, it's the doc. But I think that return to great communication, whether you're a technologist, a business guy, or whatever, is vital.
Great. So, Marcy?
I just have a real quick question. First of all, thank you for pointing out the importance of aligning and partnering with the industry so that we're actually teaching the skills we need specifically for the industries they can be employed in. And my question to you is really around instructors, kind of playing off of what Paul just said, was do you find, or I should say, who are you using for these, as these instructors for the certification programs, and are they getting certified along with their students when they first start teaching? Because they're experts in their field, I imagine, but then they need that extra certification that's specific.
Yeah, I'll probably have something to add to this. So we use academia. The people who teach are the teachers. We partner with instructional designers, so they create the content. It's actually not our coursework. We work with them to map to the framework. We work with them to create the content. We review it, we add in X, and then they share it. Same thing with instructors. Now, we're working on, and we're in day one, on ensuring that we're removing their barriers to do that, to give them the training, to certify them in X and Y and Z, and get them comfortable and confident, and do it at scale. But it's all about, for us, it's all about the teachers.
In our case, we actually provide trainings to the teachers, training of trainer, and we do almost 20,000 of them every year. And we focus on the platform skills. We want them to use modern platforms because we assume that the domain knowledge they would know, and they need to upgrade that. That's something which the training partner could take care. But how well you deliver the training is quite critical, because that is what will set the standards. They have to repeat that training of trainer every year at the moment. So it's a little tough, particularly if it's public funding. They're saying that why don't you make it 3 years or 5 years? But because we just started last 1-2 years, just to make sure that every teacher is of good quality, we ask them to keep repeating that training of trainer every year for the moment.
Some other questions?
Hi, I'm Sheila from the World Bank, and I wanted to just mention 2 things. One, as a follow-up to what Pablo said, we actually have the World Development Report, The Future of Work. We ran a MOOC with 30,000 participants, but we've also packaged it as bite-sized learning. So if you go to the olc.worldbank.org and search for The Future of Work, then you'll find all of these. Pablo has summarized it beautifully, but if you want a deep dive and listen to some of the videos and so on, they are there. And I wanted to come back to your question on the Alexa, and the way I understood that was that why can't we have an Alexa for skilling and reskilling and upskilling?
Or exactly.
Yeah.
To clarify.
Yeah.
It wasn't a why or why not.
Yeah.
It was more of a when.
Yeah, okay, very good. But I think the when is now, because you could look at different aspects of disruptive technology, right? So podcasts are a great way in low bandwidth environments where videos you have difficulty, but we're also using now chat bots or tutor bots, whereby even for the future of work, we've codified using AI and natural language about 300 or 400 questions around that space. So the first point that the learner may go to rather than a real tutor would be the tutor bot to ask a question and get an answer. The nice part of it is that the machine learns, so the more we use it, the better it gets. But I wanted to just summarize by saying, yes, there is no replacement for the teacher. About 15, 20 years ago, there would be research that says no significant, earlier, about 15 years ago, there was research that says the human face-to-face learning is much superior to everything else. Then about 8 years ago, it went to there's no significant difference between the two. And today, in some cases, digital and blended learning can be even better than face-to-face. So there's the magic in the blend, and where we see 4 areas where digital and blended help. One is to scale. The other is, as you said, to personalize. The third is to flip the classroom, to give the facilitator, the expert, more time to focus on the things they're good at rather than death by PowerPoint. And the fourth is the digital footprint. Like we're doing AR and VR, and every little click and the eyeball move and everything is captured, and that can be used for so much. So, long answer.
Thank you, Sheila, for asking and answering.
Well, let me just add some reference, since people like references. You need to do that, because something in research that speaks to it.
John Hagel with Deloitte has done some work around exponential learning, and he did, in fact, show that between 6 and 15 humans in small pods, augmented or enhanced by technology, would facilitate and accelerate the learning process. So it might be a nice augmentation to blend.
Thank you, Paul.
Just really quick, I thought, your comments on that are fantastic. There's School A-Cool 42 that I think opened School 42 in California. And it was just fascinating. It was a purely flipped model. Where the students were, actually there were no facilitators, there were no teachers in that model. The students were just learning online in the digital space, and then they were practicing hands-on and collaborating with students. I think those models are really exciting, and what we've got to do, education does not experiment enough and quickly enough. Analyze and quickly move on. Do it in bite size. Don't do it gigantic. But I found that model was so cool in getting to like great uses of digital while getting to great uses of hands-on inside the classroom. I really liked your point.
We'll have 2 minutes left if there is some other question that we can. So I would just close saying that here we are the people to transform this. We are pioneers. I'm so glad to be part of this crowd. I think as Michael Saylor was telling yesterday, he was asking a question, how we're going to communicate to the world this is needed. Because this conversation is very important. It's happening here, but I don't listen the governments. And I was advising a president 15 years ago and even working in development banks, and the conversation is not moving faster, and really the society is needing upskilling in many, many ways, being more human, more cloud computing. But thank you all. Let's give an applause to this panel.
Yeah, we're going to have a break time. Thank you, everyone. We're going to have a 15-minute break. Please join us at 12:30 for our closing discussion.